Wilmette Zoning Board of Appeals. Ms. Roberts, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Felkoff.
Here.
Mr. Glittard.
Here.
Ms. Norick.
Here.
Mr. Pelleton.
Here.
Mr. Sermon.
Here.
Ms. Urban.
Here.
Chairman Schneider.
Here. Could Ms. Roberts, could you please share with the folks that may be interested in how to contact this meeting? Please provide them the information.
This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under a stay-at-home order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Zoning Board of Appeals, and this evening we are conducting our business in compliance with the state law. Tonight, this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube Live. The URL for that is www.youtube.com/user/Village of Wilmette/live. To participate in the meeting, you can join through Microsoft Teams, the Village's website at www.wilmette.com, and find the calendar event for the zoning board meeting. There is a link for you to join the meeting there. You will also find the meeting agenda and case reports under the calendar entry. Alternatively, you can view the meeting on YouTube and call into the meeting, allowing you to listen and speak using your telephone. The phone number is 872-239-8225. This information is also on the website. Tonight's meeting code is 718-690-16#. If you are using the phone, press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Whether using Teams or the telephone, staff does not have the ability to unmute any participants. You may also submit your comments through YouTube Live and emails to comdev@wilmette.com. A member of the village staff will read your comment to the zoning board. All comments to the Zoning Board of Appeals will be recorded in the meeting minutes as we typically do. For our meeting guests joining by Teams, when you are not speaking, please keep your device muted to minimize disruption of the proceedings, and please keep your video turned off so that the board members can be seen. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. For those of you new to our proceedings, the purpose of this board is to hear evidence on applications for variances from our zoning ordinance and on applications for special use. Based upon the evidence we hear this evening, we will make a recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees as to whether the applications that come before us this evening should be granted or denied. We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review set forth in section 5.4.f of our village ordinance. Applications for special use will be considered based on whether the standards of review set forth in section 5.3.e of our village ordinance are met. The Village Board of Trustees will consider the recommendations we make this evening at their next regularly scheduled meeting on June 22nd. Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The Village Board has the final say on all applications and will make its own determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendations. There's one small exception to this rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to an application, in order for the Village Board of Trustees to approve that application, a supermajority of 5 Village Board members must vote to approve it, rather than a simple majority of 4. There's one other small peculiarity to our proceedings of which you should be aware. This board does not operate by majority vote. We operate instead by a tyranny of 4. In other words, no matter how many board members are present on a given evening, in order to get a positive recommendation from this board, an application must receive 4 affirmative votes. Since we have all 7 board members are present tonight, we can proceed. Nevertheless, if any of the applicants here tonight, for whatever reason, wish to request a continuance to the next available date on our schedule, the next available date for any applicant who would like to request a continuance this evening is July 21st. There's no penalty for asking for a continuance. No such request will be held against you when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for a continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before making any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request a continuance, there's no guarantee as to how many board members will be present on the evening to which your case is continued. The cases we shall hear this evening will be heard in the order set forth on the published agenda. When your case is called, please state your name and address. Tell us exactly why your application meets the standards of review that are applicable to it. Each member of this board is a longtime resident of the village and has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received from village staff a report containing all written information that you have submitted in support of your application, as well as any other correspondence that the village has received. Accordingly, it's not necessary that you repeat what you have already stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention as to why you believe your application meets the standards of review. After the applicant has had a chance to speak, we will open the floor to others who wish to speak on the application. I will recognize each attendee to ask if you have a comment, so please wait to be called. Everyone will be permitted to have their say, but we would ask that you keep your comments as short and as to the point as possible. Any comments received through the YouTube chat, team chat, or email will be read into the record at this time. After we have heard all oral arguments, I will close the evidence and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on an application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceedings will be the members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding and all testimony tonight must be given under oath. If you are here planning to testify tonight, I would ask you to raise your right hand at this time to be sworn in. Do you swear and affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you are about to give? If so, please say, I do. Ms. Roberts, I assume all of you, we haven't heard all of you, but I assume I saw your right hand. I assume you've all been sworn in. And I will renew my request if we have other applicants that are not visible today, right now. Ms. Roberts, will you please call the first case?
Our first case is 2021 Z23, 2041 Kenilworth Avenue. This is a request for a 2.5-foot fence height variation and a fence openness variation to permit the replacement of a 6.5-foot tall solid fence in the side yard adjoining a street. And our applicants are here.
Yes, hello, this is Stephanie Seabor for this matter.
Good evening. Did we swear you in? Did we swear you in, Ms.
Yes,
Seabor?
you did. Yes, you did. I just didn't turn on my video because
That's fine. No problem. Go ahead, please. Good evening.
Good evening. So this matter, as you know, relates to a fence that is on the border between my property and the adjacent property on Kenilworth Avenue. This fence has been here since before either of us owned the property. And it is, about 6.5 feet tall, and it runs, from, the edge of our mutual property where, over to the east and then to the west. And it is dilapidated. It needs to be replaced. It's falling down. There's a hole in it. My neighbor's dog got through it yesterday, and it just presents a risk because it's near where my kids play at the edge of our driveway. They're like riding their bikes or their scooters or whatever. And we just want to do a like kind replacement of the fence. So my neighbor on Kenilworth Avenue replaced his fence along one side of his property, and we'd like to replace it with fencing that's the same. So it goes, along the east side of his property, and then also along the south side of his property. So it all matches and looks nice. And We'd like it to, be the same like kind 6.5 foot fencing to, whatever it is, about 4 or 5 feet from the sidewalk. And so, it's identical to what is existing across the street. Their configuration, they have the same 6.5 foot privacy fence that runs, along the edge of their property. We want the same thing. It's a like kind replacement of what is already there. There's no risk to traffic because it's not at an intersection. In fact, my driveway and the driveway across the street from mine are the only driveways on 21st Street between Kenilworth and Chestnut. So there's no impediment to traffic. It wouldn't affect visibility coming out of my driveway because it's the same as what's there now. And there's also like, I don't know if any of you guys came by our property where there's like a large shrub bush situation there at the end of the driveway before the sidewalk. And so really there's no harm to, public safety. There's no harm to visibility from the street, from my driveway. It's a like kind replacement is what's already there in an identical configuration to what they have across the street. So we respectfully request a variance to allow for the dilapidated, unsafe, ugly fencing, frankly, to be replaced with something that's nice and will have aesthetic benefits to the neighborhood and mutually improve the value of our properties.
Thank you, Ms. Sieber. So just to clarify, you are the owner of 2040 Chestnut. That's to the south of the fence. Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz, or Donald Schwartz and Meredith Ilk own the property to the north of you. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you are the applicant to reconstruct this fence. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you mind, Reinhardt, if I follow up on your question there?
Sure.
Whose property is the fence on?
It's along the property boundary.
Well, it's still on someone's property.
Well, I mean, I'd have to look at the survey to see if it's technically on my property or theirs, but we want to share in the cost of the fencing. It separates our properties. From our perspective, it's sort of immaterial if it's on technically 2040 or technically on 2041 because it's, we're in agreement that it needs to be replaced and we're going to share in the cost and it borders both of our properties.
And that makes sense. I think that what Mr. Falkoff might be getting to is that I believe that it faces, you have the outside of the fence facing you, and your neighbors to the north have the inside where you can see the structure of the fence.
That's correct.
Facing them.
Yeah, that's
So
correct.
then,
the inside of the fence faces their property. So
right.
If that's the case, then it would probably be technically on 2041 since the inside would have to face their property.
Right.
I
Now,
suppose
that
that's
doesn't
correct,
stop
yeah.
you from taking that down and putting a fence up on your property. It would have to be reversed. The structure would be on your side and the outside of the fence would be facing your neighbors to the north.
To this.
Yes, I understood. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's something that, we can figure out whose fence is on the inside. I mean,
Right.
At this point, I think the operative question is, can we replace the fence or not?
Right. But the other point is that I believe the fence has to be 6 inches or a foot inside your property line, if that's correct. So I didn't do a real hard look at what obstacles might be there, but the fence would shift then if it was built on your property versus their property.
I mean, I feel like it would be in everybody's best interest for the fencing to be contiguous because there's fencing between, I don't know the exact street address, but it's whatever the property is in, one house to the east from 2041. So I would want the fencing to be contiguous. You know what I'm saying? I would want it to all be in one straight line. I wouldn't want it to be a fence and then 6 inches in another fence. I would want it to all be straight, across the back of my property, because that's what there is now. All the fencing is, in a straight line. It doesn't, zigzag and what have you.
Ms. Sieber, if I may, you are requesting that the 6.5 foot tall fence along the south lot line, or the west 15 feet of this, in other words, from 21st Street east, is within the side joining 21st Street.
Reinhard, I'm missing all of that. I don't know if anybody
There was
else
some
can.
background noise. Someone's on the
Yeah.
train.
I'm saying that you're requesting that the 6.5 tall fence along the south lot line, the west 15 feet of the fence is within the side yard adjoining 21st Street, because the zoning ordinance limits height of the fence in the side yard to 4.5 feet, to 4 feet. So a variation is required for that 15 feet
Right.
on 21st Street east. Now, I just wanted to, I know that the fence across the street from you, which is similarly situated, is a newer fence, and that does not comply with this requirement. The fences, then going down south on 21st Street, there are 6 similar situated lots, with pairs of lots, each are in the same situation as yours is. And none of those 6 violate the zoning requirement. None of them have the fence encroaching on that 15-foot setback. Going north from your lot, north of Kenilworth Avenue, there are 2, between Kenilworth and Beechwood, there are 2 similarly situated that have a fence, high fence, 6.5 feet, that encroach on that 15-foot side yard. They're very old, and they've probably been approved, and some of them seem to be falling down. So your request, and its exception, and if you go further to Hunter, you find the same situation, no exceptions. So your request is unusual, an exception to the normal, what is happening in the rest of the neighborhood.
Reinhard, if I could jump in, this is Maria Urban. I'm having a hard time understanding what the problem is with stepping the fence down. People do that all the time, and I'm not seeing a safety concern. I'm not seeing a compelling reason for.
Yeah, that's a fair question. The real reason is aesthetic, because I don't know if you came by my house, but there would be 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of fencing within just a few feet of each other. Because if you look at the end of my driveway, which is south of the fence, there is a wrought iron fence, just like one piece, which matches the fencing that goes around, the remainder of my lot. And then just to the north of that, my neighbors, Don and Meredith, have what is currently like a chicken wire fence, basically. My understanding is they intend to replace that chicken wire fencing with a white picket fence. They had intended to do the white picket there and then the 6.5 foot tall fence going back east. But with all of like the permit issues last year, that just wasn't done. But currently, so it's wrought iron, chicken wire, which is eventually going to be white picket, hopefully. And then from there would then be the lower fence for like the 15 feet or whatever, then the higher privacy fence. So it'd be, 4 different types of fencing all together in one small spot. And I just think that aesthetically it would look better if it was only 3.
And if I could just add, the material for the fencing would not change, simply the height would, and you've already got more open fencing facing the street, both the chicken wire and your wrought iron. So it would simply be a matter of grading the height to eventually be what is currently there. I'm trying to understand this.
I guess I'm not understanding of the grading issue. I mean, I don't know that there's any grading that would be needed.
And I'm referring to the profile of the fence, I guess, and saying that. So it's not grading in terms of the land,
The land.
the-
Yeah,
It's
I
the
mean,
height,
basically,
it's
it
the
would
height
be
of the
for-
fence.
Yes,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
correct.
Christine, what was that?
It's the height of the fence that you would have it stepping up. You know, in that
Yes.
15-foot area, it'd step up from 4 feet or,
Yeah, I guess we haven't confirmed that the same type of fencing would be available at a lower height profile. If that's your question, Maria, to say it would be the same fence, I mean, it would be different, you know what I'm saying? It would, the fencing that they have around the other side of their property has like a lattice pattern, I guess, along the top. Anyway.
Stephanie, just so you know, this is Bob Sermon. Excuse me. Our role as the zoning board is to interpret the codes and apply those codes. We're all just volunteers and we make a recommendation to the board. So whatever decision is made tonight, the board can overrule us, as Reinhardt had stated. But our goal is to really interpret the codes and apply them.
Understood. Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I mean, I guess sort of to one point, I mean, I know there's been some discussion today about which way would the fence face and which way would be interior and exterior. I mean, frankly, the primary reason that I was the applicant at this juncture was to just share in the administrative burden of this process with my neighbor. You know, Don and Meredith submitted the application in the first instance. And so, you know, I'm helping to share in the burden with them here in terms of, you know, does the fence have to get moved 6 inches or which side has to face out? I mean, I'm hoping that we could, you know, figure that all out, you know, as joint applicants.
I think, Ms. Eber, I think that the question is on the table is whether the west 15 feet of the fence that is within the side yard adjoining 21st Street should be permitted to be 6.5 feet rather than 4.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's correct. Yes.
And as I've said, that is the exception up and down 21st Street, if we proceed to do that. But anyway, are there any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, Ms. Roberts, have we heard anything from anyone in the community about this?
You got an email that I sent out today. There's no comments in the YouTube chat, and I don't believe there's anybody else in the meeting for this matter besides their owner.
I know that our neighbors, Eric, I'm blanking on his last name right now, but they live at the property that is immediately to the east of 2041 Kenilworth Avenue. I know that they're in full support of this.
Thank you.
So if there's a way for them to communicate that to you, I know they'd be willing to express that.
Thank you. Hearing no one else, maybe we should have a motion on this.
Sure, I'll make a motion, Bob Sermon. I move to recommend granting a request for a 2.5 fence height variation and fence openness variation to permit the replacement of a 6.5 foot tall solid fence in the side yard adjoining a street at 2041 Kenilworth Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
Have a second?
I'll second
that.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, as I had mentioned, our role is to interpret the codes, and fences are very difficult. I mean, we have all different sort of cases that come along. Sometimes there's a hardship on some of them where, you know, the street is dead ends into somebody's house and the headlights at night are very disruptive. Or people feel that along Ridge Road, just to the east of you, they feel, well, we're on a busy road, we should have a fence. And, you know, I don't see the hardship. I understand how you would want that as a privacy issue. but with strict interpretation of the code, I cannot support it.
I agree with Bob, and you stated as the primary reason for having a uniform height, the fact that it's an aesthetic, but you've already got a wrought iron fence on your side yard. Your neighbors are talking about putting in a white picket fence, so it will be, they're putting in a new fence that will not match your fence, and I'm not persuaded by the argument that's been made tonight. I will not be supporting this.
Any other comments?
I'll add to that. I agree with both Bob and Maria. The other issue is the privacy, and I don't think the last 15 feet is really a privacy issue. There's a garage sitting there, so that's not
Not on that side of the fence. The garage is to the east of that.
Ms. Seaver, we have closed the testimony. If you
Apologies.
So I'm in. I also will not be supporting the request.
Any other comments? If not,
yes, Didier Gletard. I would say that stepping that fence down at 15 feet to the street would not be a significant burden on building fence. It's a simple aesthetic, can be done aesthetically, and for that reason, I am not supporting it either.
This is Chris. I too agree with my fellow board member comments.
okay. No other comments, and I agree with what has been said. I think this would be an exception to what is happening all the way up and down that street. And so let's take a vote, Ms. Roberts.
Mr. Sermon,
No.
Ms. Urban,
No,
Mr. Falcoff,
No.
Mr. Gletard,
No,
Ms. Norick,
No.
Mr. Pelleton,
No.
Chairman Schneider.
No, and this will go as a negative recommendation to Village Board, which meets June 22nd to consider this case. Thank you very much, Ms. Seaver.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2021 Z23.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, who was the second on that?
Brad Falcoff.
Thank you. Ms. Urban,
Yes,
Mr. Falcoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
yes,
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelleton,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you. And Ms. Roberts, can we go to the next case, please?
Our next, excuse me. Our next case is 2021 Z12 140 Laurel Avenue. This is a request for a 1-foot retaining wall side yard setback variation to permit the replacement of existing retaining walls. And I believe our applicant is here.
Good evening.
Good evening. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yeah, is this Mr. Todd?
It is. How are you?
Good evening. Please proceed.
Thank you. So like was just previously stated, I am representing 140 Laurel, asking for a variance on the retaining wall setback. To give you a little understanding, there are kind of a few.
Excuse me, are you the owner or the builder or what?
I'm the builder, the general contractor.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
So no problem. So to give you a little background, I don't know how many stopped by the lot. There's significant grade issues on that lot. Approximately, depending on where you look, for going east to west, the lot drops about 8 feet, going towards the ravine by the golf course that leads out to Lake Michigan. And so because of that, everything drifting down towards that towards that ravine, you have that height difference going from one side of the lot towards another side. But now on that lot, there are retaining walls currently on both sides, the east and the west side of the property. Some of them are newer than others, some of them are older. On the west side, there are almost like an old stone looking retaining wall that is not in compliance with the 1 foot setback right now. It's close. Yes.
Mr. Todd, you know that when we visited the site, I don't know if others, but those things are not visible there now.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. That side should be, because
So I
it's
heard-
from. Go ahead.
Excuse me 1 second. I was able to go into the alley and you could see some, by looking through the neighbor's property, see some of the west wall and a tiny bit of the east wall, but absolutely nothing from the front.
Correct. I mean, right now, so because we're in the middle of construction, I have to put down tarps like that. That's a safety issue, more so to prevent cave-ins and something like that if there was a big rain. So it's also a very sandy soil over there. So in order to basically secure the site, I have to have those tarps up. So that's why they're there. But to kind of describe them, on the west side, it is, as you can see from the alley, it is a older stone wall, deteriorating, that runs going north-south from the alley going back. On the east side, part of that has already been replaced by the neighbor to the east. Again, not in that 1 foot setback, but recently it's been done where I'm going to estimate about 15 feet was replaced, going from their garage towards their house. And then the stone wall steps in a little bit, going around where an old bed was, and then it bumps back out to a concrete wall that's been, if I had to estimate, I would say the concrete wall is 15 to 20 years old, where the stone wall is much older. Now the current concrete wall is running almost right along the property line as well. So what our variance request is intending is to have a straight wall along the property line.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
could you put up 1.5, the plan that indicates the walls? Could you put that up on for us to see? And you can point to what you're talking about.
Are you asking me to put
Yes.
it up?
I got it.
Or Lisa,
Sorry, which one?
1.5, sorry.
Okay.
Yes,
that-
that one. That's the one, yes.
Okay.
If you could point to that and describe what you're,
So you know it might be a little, okay, if you look on the left side, you see the existing retaining wall. It's circled, sorry. It's circled right now as the existing retaining wall.
Mhm.
Right there. I don't have control of the mouse. I don't know if I can take control. Can I?
I don't think you can, but if you can
Oh,
tell me.
Yeah,
what-
I'll try and walk you through it too.
Yeah.
So the existing, you can see that runs basically, that was what I was describing, was the old stone wall right now, that goes all the way back along that side. And that's definitely in bad shape. Our intention on that wall is that the max height would be around 20 inches. And then it's currently, like I said, loose stone, and we're hoping to switch it to railroad timbers. We have talked to the neighbor about this. They are in agreement that the wall is in very poor shape. So but the drop off, you can kind of see, this doesn't have the topography on there, but that basically handles the neighbors to the west, where they have to have that big drop off to get to there, so they could have more of a flat usable lot as well. Same reason on this one, that you'd have a retaining wall on the other side, is to create a more flat usable wall. Now, what you're highlighting right now with the mouse is on the east side. I would say that currently the wall goes on that line stemming from the front of the yard, going right there, going back to kind of just to that window well. Nope, the next window well.
Oh, there you go.
Right back to there. So that's where roughly the concrete wall is currently. A little bit further, I believe. I can tell you, double check. So there's currently a concrete retaining wall on that side, and then which was in my opinion, replaced the stone wall that was there, that is currently there on the other portions of the lot. So somewhere along the way that was replaced, that was put in, and then it bumps in a little bit. So this is what's proposed. So if you go to another drawing, I can show you a little bit. If you go to page, oh, not that one. Sorry.
Well, Corey, while we're on the topography one, I had a question.
There, that was, if you go to the one before, that was a topography one. That will explain it. Yes.
So the question I have, Corey, is that all the topography numbers that are on here are existing, right? They're not proposed?
That one right there is existing, correct.
Okay, so it does show that there is at least a foot difference in many of the areas between the existing property and the adjacent property.
So it's much more significant than a foot. So if you look right here on the left side, you see the number, it says plus 610.36. That's in the bottom left of the drawing. So if you bring the mouse down a little bit, to your left a little bit.
Left.
A little bit further to the left.
10.36.
Yeah,
okay.
so that's your elevation above. If I'm telling you things you know, please, I apologize, but that's your elevation above sea level. So that's 610 feet, 0.36 feet. So now if you go all the way to the right side to the neighbors, you'll see some of them are 615, 614, 616, whatever, something like that. So that's showing on that one alone a 5 foot drop off, 4.5 foot drop off, something like that.
Are there any other properties on the block that have this significant drop and retaining walls?
So going towards that ravine, there has to be, there's definitely drop off. I can pull up from the.
So the ravine from here goes what direction? It slopes from the.
So the ravine,
east.
Do you know where the ravine is? Like the one that would run, if you're looking at this map to the left. So that drops down to about 590. So going from the ravine all the way over, it gets even lower at some points, but if you get closer to Sheridan Road, it gets up to like 617 feet.
Oh.
So that block radius has that, like going from that, 1.5 block radius has that kind of drop off.
And which ones are you thinking of replacing out of all the retaining walls?
Well, they all need attention. So I mean, ideally on the west side, that's crumbling. So I would like to replace that with like a railroad tie or something like that. The stone wall is really in bad shape. Then on the east side of the property, my intent is to do something like a landscaping block, something a little bit like a Brussels type block wall. Now, I mean, we could do a railroad tie there too. It doesn't really matter. They're both structurally sound.
Okay, and the other question I have is, so when you're on the new property, the soil is going to be just slightly lower than the top of the railroad tie or the block material. Is that correct?
My intent is, my intent would be to step it where needed, yes, and then there will definitely be grade across this. That's a perfect one to show. So there will be grade across this. You can see like I'm going down even to have to pitch. You have to pitch for water.
Sure.
You can't, right? So you can, if you look at all these grading numbers on here, you can see that they definitely go down. And so my intent would be to keep the retaining wall at grade, and then pitch it all to all the water to the retention, the dry wells that are on the property.
So the retaining wall will just be flat starting at a certain height, or will it drop as the topography drops?
It would drop as the topography drops.
Okay.
Mr.
How much the wall would the neighbor see on that side particularly?
So I'm sorry, on the east side or the west side?
On the west, you know, you
the west side,
a 20-inch wall, but I don't know if that means 20 inches from your grade or 20 inches from theirs, or how does it compare to the existing?
I see. So right now, like they see, I mean, like I said, it would actually probably be coming down a little bit, but they would see at max be 20 inches. exactly what's
But they
proposed.
do see that amount now or close to it?
Yes, if not more.
Okay.
Like, I think I'll be able to shave it down a little bit and make it a little bit not as severe.
Okay.
Mr. Todd,
Yes.
Reinhard Schneider, why can't you conform to the 1 foot setback?
Well, the 1 foot setback's tricky, right? Because I will say, like, I mean, obviously anything is possible, but in this specific lot, you would have to carve out so much of it you'd have to be excavating, specifically, like if I look at the west side, right? I would have to excavate along the entire property line an extra foot to replace an existing wall that really would just take away from usable space. The lot would become really tight back there. And it's not, and like I said, that wall has been existing forever. On the other side, go ahead.
Are there footings underneath that? Do you have to go down below frost line?
No, there's no way there's footings on this. It would be in my opinion, was this a stacked stone that's currently there. So excavating that out would be as simple as just lifting the stones that were set 100 years ago and take that out.
So these kinds of retaining walls don't require a footing going down 3'6" or whatever?
No. I mean, if you were to do it right today, or are you asking the ones that I'm putting in or the ones that are currently there?
Well, what is the right thing to do?
So you don't need one in either scenario. There's the stacked stone would have been better if they had done it that way that long ago. They wouldn't have done it that way though. It would have prevented from any movement or anything like that. For a railroad tie, you don't need a footing. For landscape block for that height, you don't need one as well.
So you just put it on gravel or on grade or whatever. What do you put underneath? Nothing?
So for the railroad ties, generally you do something called it's like I'm drawing a blank on the name. It's not a dead soldier, but it's a board that kind of goes into the lot and it kind of prevents any movement. So that would go towards our property right now, and then it would support the walls, prevent any movement there. And then, yeah, exactly that. You've probably seen a ton of landscaping blocks used as support going around because it's not that high. You don't have the pressure that would be building up. So that can go exactly as you're describing on a compacted base.
Mr. Todd?
Yes.
This is Maria Urban. In the letter that came with our packet, you state that the hardship is that it's going to create a smaller yard space. And as I look at it, a 1 foot setback on both sides would really eat up a grand total of 136 square feet of space on a lot that is almost 12,000 square feet. And in a project, an overall project that is brand new construction, we rarely give variances on projects that are brand new construction. And I'm having a difficult time being persuaded by your letter that this is an infringement or a curtailing of yard space, given how large the lot is.
Well, I hear your point. I appreciate that. I would say that there's a couple things. If you scroll down just a little bit further on this drawing, so you can see on the west side, like that would become a very tight area. I'm sorry, on the east side, if I brought that in a foot, that definitely becomes tighter all through in there. Even to create a decent swale becomes tighter. It becomes a lot harder to get water movement. So, well, again, nothing's impossible. I will never say, like, on anything, anyone ever asks me in construction, I'll say nothing's impossible. This one makes it much difficult to have that walkway around there and to have a swale. So that would be one thing that I would point out. As far as the others, if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see, I'm sorry, the other direction. In the stone wall in the back from the neighbors, they did the same thing. They repaired it, and I do not believe there's a foot setback in there, but they repaired it kind of to prevent the erosion, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking for in there. And actually, there'd be no way to even to connect into a retaining wall or anything like that. I'd have to at some point cut back in to square it off, even if I was 1 foot in. Does that make sense? So at some point it would have to be going into to cut it off. But I would say that the erosion issue and cutting in and basically redoing the whole side on the left, something that's already existing, not to mention I would have to remove some trees on the left side because of that. I would rather not. So that's kind of my reasoning behind it.
And I had a similar thought to Maria's, and that is with new construction, you have the option of where you site the house. And just because you chose to, or the homeowner chose to site the house close to that property line is not really compelling. That you're creating your own hardship. So I had a difficulty in seeing what the hardship was in this. And I understand what you're saying, and I know it would help, and it would make the lot larger and all that, but it doesn't, it's just not compelling in terms of the actual zoning codes.
Well,
in my opinion.
What I'll say, the only thing I'll point out is that this isn't your typical Wilmette lot as far as topography, right? That does have a lot more grading involved than what is what you normally find. So because of that being so severe, it does change it a little bit. You do have things that are a little bit more unusual on this area of town than some of the other sections. And specifically, if you have to account for multiple feet of drop off, that's why most people do these on right, or historically have been right along the property line. It's because it helps both sides.
Corey, I have a question. Have you talked to the neighbors on both sides?
I have. So the neighbor to the west agrees in full support that the wall is, and they see their wall more, right? That side is a lot more exposed to them. So they're looking at a deteriorating stone wall. So Chris Panic actually talked to them, and they said that they love the idea of getting a new wall in there. I spoke to the neighbor to the east and told him all of our plans, and he was more concerned with the back section, but he never said that he had any issue with this at all.
Corey, this is Brad Falcoff. I've got two questions, and the first question is going to be totally unfair, but I'll ask it anyway. And if you don't know the answer, maybe someone else does. And that is, does anyone, or do you know what the reason for the 1 foot spacing is why the requirement is there for the setback of 1 foot?
I guess I'd ask Lisa the question, but from my interpretation, a lot of these cases where it comes where there's a retaining wall between them come up when we're looking at properties that are along the lake. And if somebody wants to build their wall on the lot line, then it prevents the adjacent owner from building theirs, because in the case of the ones along the lake, they need to have the footings. So I think the reason for the setback is to allow the footing to hit the property line and the footing not to extend into the adjacent property. So if you understand it, so if you have like an 8-inch wall, the footing might extend 12 inches on each side, forming an upside down T. So by having it the foot, then when they build the retaining wall, they're not, encroaching on the neighbor's property with the footing, the foundation.
Bob, would that militate then in favor of the applicant, saying since there is no footing on this, that there is no chance of them encroaching on the other property owner's land, and that arguably it's much ado about nothing because they're going straight down?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. If you're not going to have a footing, you're not going to have. I believe that's the requirement. Lisa, have you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I would just, yes, the idea was that the footing would not encroach on another person's property, and just the excavation and whatever you would need to do a retaining wall would not negatively impact the neighbor or the public right of way. Yeah.
And I saw it as very similar to the 6-inch setback for a fence. You know, if there's any maintenance that needs to be done or anything that the neighbor wants to do, there needs to be some space.
Yeah, and a post hole.
Okay, and then my other question is, I went out today and I took pictures of what I could see from the front of the property. I don't see the trees on the owner's side. I see the trees on the other side of the fence, which would suggest that they are on the neighbor's lot.
Sorry, which side are you talking about?
Well, I was starting off with the west side.
So you can see right now, like this shows the fence and this shows where the trees are. So if we scroll, I don't know which tree specifically you're talking to, but you can see that they're all right on the property line. Keep scrolling up and you can see all those, and then all of these are on the property line or inside. They're definitely all on the Panic's property.
And all of those trees are expected to stay?
No, which ones are you talking? If you're talking about in the back are the ones that I want to save. So right back, yes, those. So I'm hoping to save the majority of those.
And if you have to come in 1 foot, you're not going to be able to save the trees?
Well, I mean, you can see where the current fence is, and if I have to dig down a foot, I mean, I can't imagine that if I went a foot all the way down all those, that they would all make it, but I would do what I have to do. But I mean, if a foot is my rule, I'd have to come in a foot.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So one last question, Corey.
Yes.
The wall that's on the east side,
Yep.
that's not on the property, is that going to remain? Or
The wall. Now I'm sorry. Now I'm confused what area we're talking.
On the east side, don't scroll down anymore. It's at the top of the page now on the right hand.
That's on the neighbor's property, yeah?
That's on the neighbors. That's going to stay. That's a small, again, like it's a very small stone retaining wall that they've had work done on. So that would stay, yes.
Okay.
That's their fan, their wall. I mean, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do anything to that.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just below that, though, you have landscaping block retaining wall, and it appears the wall is going to be right on the lot line.
It'll be set in, but yes, I mean, you can see that they didn't draw it on the line; they drew it inside. But yes.
And if I could ask, Corey, appears to be a gap between the wall that's on the east neighbor and the proposed landscape block retaining wall. Is that the case? And
it is, and that's because you don't need it there. Like I said, the grade changes, and how I was planning to step it, you wouldn't need it there.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? If not, Lisa, have we heard from anyone on this case?
I guess I'd like to ask one question. This is Didier Gotard. You indicated that you would not need footings for this property. Have you structurally evaluated the soil to confirm that?
Yes, I mean, when you go down that deep, this isn't going to be load bearing, holding up like you wouldn't need a footing. Yes, we've had that looked at. So we have done shoring even out there and things like that. Like you said, you were at the property. I'm sure you saw some of the massive shoring we put in, things along those lines. We've done the soil testing, and a wall this size would not need a footing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Lisa, have you heard anything from anyone else?
There are no comments in the YouTube chat. There's been no other communication, and I don't believe there's anybody else in the meeting for this matter.
Thank you. So I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion if nobody else is going to. I move to recommend granting a request for a 1.0 foot retaining wall side yard setback variation to permit the replacement of an existing retaining walls at 140 Laurel Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
Second? Maria, second. Thank you.
Okay. I guess it really gets down to, the interpretation of the code and the purpose of the code. And I think the purpose of the code is, as I mentioned, has to do with the footing encroaching on the adjacent neighbor. And in this case, since there's no footing required, you wouldn't be. So I guess I'd like to hear from, I'm kind of on the fence on this one and like to hear from the other board members.
And just to put forward the other side, this is a brand new construction project. And whether footings are required or not, I believe that the project should comply with what the code has set forth. If there were an instance, as we saw on Michigan Avenue, where a retaining wall was making it difficult to bring cars up and down the driveway between a house and the wall, I found that to be very compelling. I'm not hearing a similar compelling hardship here. This is a very large lot, and the amount of space that will be lost because of the 1 foot setback is minimal in the scheme of things. And unless I hear a really persuasive argument, I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Other comments from the board?
Well, I'm certainly as troubled as Bob is, and maybe others are, but I am persuaded by Maria's comments that this is new construction. I'm not yet convinced that we're going to lose trees based upon the way that the garage is set up and all that, but I'm inclined not to grant the variance.
Thank you.
This Didier, the hardship is hard for me to understand too. I mean, I guess it's a financial hardship because you don't have to do as much grading if you don't move the wall. And the tightness on one side of the property is easy to fix by shifting the building over by a foot. So it's new construction, meeting the zoning code should be a requirement.
Oops, we missed the last part of that, DDA.
I said it's new construction, and it's an insignificant change to their design to meet the code. So I don't think there's any reason to give them a variance to do so. I don't know.
This is Chris. I tend to agree as well. I do. It is a wide lot. It's a 5 foot wide lot. So there does seem that we should be able to, design and meet the requirements of the zoning code.
Okay. I think the 1 foot setback requirement for retaining wall, the purpose was, as has been stated, to make sure that the footings don't encroach on the adjacent property. In this case, that's not a condition here, and the neighbors are not objecting, and it's basically just replacing them where they are today. So I don't see why we need to insist that the 1 foot setback applies to this situations, these circumstances. So I will vote for it.
I tend to disagree. I don't see what the hardship is in this instance. The lot, if it's a 6 foot difference from side to side, that's about an inch per foot. which is far from severe. And while I understand that it's a hardship to the owner, because of the way that they have situated the house, and it's already, it's already planted. The footings have been poured and the basement walls. This is just a poor plan.
Thank you. I think we're ready to take a vote. Ms. Roberts?
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
You're muted.
No.
Mr. Falcoff,
No.
Mr. Gletard,
No.
Ms. Norick,
No.
Mr. Pelletin,
No.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So this goes with a negative recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and they will hear this case on July 21st. No, wait, sorry. Can you help? Let's see, on
June 22nd.
June 22nd. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2021 C12.
I'll second that.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Falcoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Thank you, and Ms. Roberts, can we call the next case, please?
Our next case is 2021 Z25, 4085 Bunker Lane. This is a request for a 267.24 square foot total floor area variation to permit the construction of a one-story addition, and our applicants are here.
Mr. Geisiger, good evening. Please
Good
proceed.
evening. Thank you for seeing us and giving us the time. What we are requesting, as was stated, is a 267-foot variance to our home at 4085 Bunker Lane. We've been residents in this home for 26 years. The reason for the variance is we would like to construct a single-story 16 by 18-foot den that will ultimately become a first floor bedroom. Both Janice and I are in our 70s. I have bad knees because of sports, and it's becoming more and more difficult for me to go upstairs at night. So right now, obviously I can still do it, but we would like to ultimately make that become a bedroom on the first floor. It will be constructed of brick. The other reason, as you've probably seen, is we live across from 4080, where we had reluctantly agreed to a single story, and they now have a 2-story. We have lost some privacy. There is a person living up there, and from time to time they're looking into our family room. Anyways, that's the short version of our request.
Could you, this is Bob Sermon.
Hi.
Could you explain where the property is? What, I guess when I drove out there, I thought it was the property to the south. Is that true? That's
No.
privacy issue?
It's across the street.
Oh, okay.
So they had a variance that moved what was supposed to be a single-story garage closer to the street, and it ultimately became a second-story living
Addition
space.
with a window. I'm Janice Geisiger. I also reside here. That was in 2019, and they had requested a front yard variance, which was approved. And like we said, we agreed with the garage, and it was supposed to be a single story. In fact, when I looked at the meeting video, that's exactly what was approved by this committee. And it ended up to be a 2-story with the window that faces directly into our living room and ultimately family room.
So the room that we would like to construct, which is on going in the south, the back of the house, but to the south, we have tall 30-inch evergreens that run along the property line. So we're not obstructing anybody's view from our neighbors to the south.
You're saying, I guess where I'm confused is the people across the street are causing a privacy issue?
Yes.
Because you're putting the addition behind the house.
Yes.
Right, so we have a place to go.
So you have a place
the
to
privacy
go.
issue is the current formation, and this would be out of the line of sight.
Correct.
That is correct. Mhm.
This addition to the house, does it have a closet?
It will.
It will, yes, of course.
Well, you say it will, of course, in the plans, there's no closet shown.
So what we tried to do this as minimally as possible, and maybe we should have been a little more detailed on with the architect. But on the wall that is along where the existing house where you would go in, that is going to be all closets.
And where would a master bathroom go?
There will not be a master
Master
bathroom.
bathroom.
We have a bathroom on the first floor. It's not going to be a master bedroom. It'll be a bedroom.
And as I understand it, you are concerned about privacy, but the 3 exterior walls of this, what's called on the plans, the library, are all windows and glass.
Go ahead.
Well, again, the architect went a little crazy. There is going to be a doorway onto the deck to the north. There will not be windows to the south, and there will be very few windows to the back side of the house.
Which is the west. There
Which
will
is
be
the
two
west.
windows.
Which faces the
forest
the forest preserve.
So what you're saying is that what you have supplied to us as the architect's renderings are not a fair and accurate representation of what you intend to build.
He went a little crazy on the windows, yes.
And he left off the closet as
He
well.
did.
Right.
I have a question that's along similar lines. The architect didn't indicate you have 2 condensers, air conditioning condensers, right where this new structure would be. Where would those be situated?
So we currently have a condenser on the south side.
Yep, I saw that was the third one.
And the other 2 condensers would go there.
Okay, well, if you didn't have windows on that wall, then that makes more sense.
Right.
So tell me, one other question I have is, why is the condition with the neighbor at 4080 Bunker different from the condition that anybody has in Wilmette who lives, say, for example, in Kenilworth Gardens, where you have people across the street who have homes with second stories that they can look across the street and see what you're doing just as you can look across the street and see what they're doing. So I'm not sure I understand why the experience with 4080 Bunker is any different from those experiences that most of us live with in Wilmette, particularly in a place like Kenilworth Gardens, where you have smaller lots that are squared off against each other, whereas you've got lots that are, a little bit interesting because you got the golf course sort of pushing you into odd directions.
Sure. Well, obviously, for the first 20 years or 22 years of us living here, we didn't experience that, so this has come as somewhat of a shock. But the bigger issue is my needs and the ultimate need to have a bedroom on the first floor.
And the thing with the privacy is the fact that it is so much closer to the street than any other house on the lot. We look at the side of a garage, and on the second floor, which there wasn't supposed to be a second floor over there. And now, you know, we have somebody that's looking directly into the house. And it's closer than any other house on the street, to the street. It's because of the variance.
And again, I have to stress the primary reason is the bedroom. That it's going to be a bedroom.
The difficulty I have though is if, you know, your architect should have known it would be a bedroom. Right now, the way he drew it, there's nowhere to even put a bed. I mean, you have windows all the way around, so
Right.
we're not. I can't support it right now because we're approving plans that don't reflect what the intention is. And
Thank you, Bob.
so
This DDA, I have trouble with the bedroom without seeing a full floor plan of the ground floor to see that really there's not another place that you can put a bedroom. Certainly if there isn't, you know, needing to not go upstairs could be a good reason to add space, but it's hard to know whether or not that's the case.
I would add that having come out to the property and walked around, it struck me that there were several trees that are quite dense in the front yard of 4080 Bunker that provide a great deal of privacy for them and block their views of view. I also, looking at the plans you provided, you have your living room in front and your family room in back. I'm having a hard time understanding how somebody's seeing all the way through the living room back to the family room. That strikes me as a stretch.
Well, our tree, obviously, because it's summertime, is full. In the wintertime, it's not. There's no leaves on that, and you can see in. So I can certainly appreciate your comment, but you can see they can see in. I mean, our daughter's been over and said somebody's standing in the window staring at us. So, you know.
There's window treatments for that, you know.
I guess I come back then to, is it as a bedroom? Do we need to resubmit a plan showing it as a bedroom?
Let's just proceed with what we have in front of us and see where we go. Are there any comments, any other comments, questions for the applicant?
I guess my only comment is if, you know, if they do they have the option to sort of modify their plan, you know, rather than, I mean, we can have further discussion, but they may prefer we not take a motion on, you know, make a motion on this or vote on it, because that binds them and they may have, you know, they may want to go back to their architect and make modifications.
Well, let's just get a sense of the board. Is it just the fact that the plan that was submitted does not represent what they intend to use it for? Are we ignoring the fact that they are increasing the floor area? Literally, the addition is almost 100% of the incremental increase to the floor area, which again, we go back to what is the hardship here? Because they're not modifying anything. They're just, it's a new addition. So if we're dealing just with the fact that the plan does not represent what they intend to use it for, that may be one part, but the other part is the absolute the incremental increase in floor area. But so I can get a sense of the rest of the board members here so that the applicant can have a good view of what we're thinking and may have a chance to
I guess it's This is Bob Sermon. It's hard to say for sure because we haven't, like Maria mentioned, we don't see the whole floor plan. Typically, when you're requesting an addition to the house, you'd see the whole floor plan, give the board the opportunity to say, well, did you think about changing this room within your space? You know, the goal of the zoning board is to, you know, minimize the variance. So is there a way to, you know, minimize it, or is, like you said, Reinhardt, is everybody okay? I mean, it's only 2.14% of the total floor area. So from that perspective, it appears minor. But without seeing the whole floor plan, I still notice too that there are, and this kind of surprised me, it appears that there's still 2 steps that will remain from the existing eating area to the other area. I mean,
It's one step. It's one step down.
Oh, it is? Okay, they show 2 lines, which means 2 risers.
It's one step down.
Oh, okay.
So I will weigh in with my thought, and that is I agreed with Bob that it seemed relatively minimal as a percentage, and certainly in terms of the impact on the neighbors. However, I don't understand how we can vote on plans that we haven't seen. And so what I would suggest is coming back and with a plan that reflects what it is that you intend to build with more detail, and then we would have a discussion about the hardship, and as a bad knee person, I can certainly understand it, and I don't know how compelling that is to everybody else, but I can certainly understand it.
I'd just like to add one thing, that when you come back with the plan, you can show what the future plan would be. Just here's the bed and we're put a closet here. Obviously, you're not going to build the closet now. It wouldn't make sense until you need to use it.
And I agree. And I think we'd like to see things like, where do those air conditioner units go? Because the compressor units, because that is something that we often see, people requesting exceptions. So certainly you want to get that all figured out now, rather than get this squared away and then have to come back to request another exception because there's something else that just hadn't quite been thought out.
So, Mr. Gaishaker and Ms. Gaishaker, you get a sense of what the members of this board are heading toward. I would like to ask, if that's okay, Mr. Gaishaker, Ms. Roberts, what are the options for the applicant at this point?
Can I just add one thing? This is Didier Clotard. I would suggest if you do decide to come back with different information, that you make sure you bring a floor plan of the entire ground floor, even if it's just a diagrammatic floor plan, so we can understand how everything in your house relates.
Sure.
I will also add, we've made no mention of stormwater, but I'm a golfer and I'm out at the Wilmette golf course often, and I know that flooding is an issue, and I would hope that that would be something that your plans would also address.
Well, interestingly, yes, it is a flooding issue. And since they redid the 7th tee where we live on, we have spent close to $40,000 because the golf course water continues to pour. So we've had our entire basement dug up and put an entire system in to keep the water away. At one point, because of the flooding, because of what they did to the golf course, the fire department came out and sandbagged our house. So I certainly understand, and it appears that what they're doing now is going to rectify that.
The drainage that they put in. So we've been very fortunate after we did that work that there's been no more flooding here.
Yeah. We're very familiar with it.
And I sympathize with you. I wouldn't want to have to live through that myself. But the point is you're adding more impervious floor area to your lot. And I would think that that is an issue that should be addressed as part of any addition.
Thank you, Maria. Ms. Roberts, what are the options at this point for the applicant? Can he withdraw this and can he reapply?
Yes, I would suggest if the applicant wants to have their architect make some changes or whatever you want to do, that we table the case to a specific date so that you don't have to redo notice. And if you're not ready at that time, we can always table it again. And then you all can reevaluate based on whatever's been submitted. Alternatively, if the applicant wants to, they can ask for you all to vote. They can, take their request then on to the village board. The village board could always remand them, but if the applicant feels confident that what they want to do is make some changes or revisions or provide more information, it's probably more expedient to table tonight and come back at a date certain.
I think that's what we would prefer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, would Ms. Roberts, what would be, I would think 30 days or more. I don't know how much time you need, Mr. Geishiker, to resubmit.
I would guess 30 days. I think
Well, and if 30 days isn't enough, we can always,
request.
yes, do it a little bit longer.
Okay,
Because it depends on what our architect's availability is right now.
so 30 days would take us to July 7th. Is that right, Ms. Roberts?
That is the first meeting in July. Yes, July 7th.
Great.
So do we have to make a motion to continue this?
To table this.
That's what you all want to do. Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, I can do that. I'll make a motion to continue case 2021 Z25 at 4085 Bunker Lane until our July 7th meeting.
Second.
Okay,
I'm sorry, was that Christine?
Yeah, I think we had, there were a couple seconds, but I'll take it. Yeah.
Mr. Pelleton,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Glittard,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
yes. Thank you. So this will be tabled to July 7th, and good luck, Mr. and Mrs. Geishiker.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
We'll see you then.
I think we can proceed to the next case, yes? Ms. Roberts?
Our next case is 2021 Z14, 1300 Middlebury Lane. This is a request for a 414.96 square foot total floor area variation, a 3.03 foot front yard setback variation, a 0.35 foot side yard setback variation, and a 261.1 square foot front yard impervious surface coverage variation to permit the construction of a 1-story and two second-story additions. And I believe our applicants are here.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself and good evening.
Good evening. I'm Mike Murdoch, and I'm here on behalf of the applicants who are here as well. I used to live at 1300 Middlebury Road. So I'm going to take you through the variation requests and.
Mr. Murdoch, did we swear
Yes,
both you and the applicants in? Did we?
please. I was not on the call initially, so I'm happy to be sworn in now.
I think we need to do that, so bear with me for a second. Do you swear and affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you're about to give? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Please proceed.
Great. So this house is located at 1300 Middlebury at the corner of Middlebury and Kenilworth. And it really is a great house, but it's a quirky house, as is not uncommon in the village where you have houses on a corner. In some cases, the house faces one street, but the zoning code defines the other street facing side as the front yard. That's the case here, and that's created some of the quirks and challenges, but we really just sort of get started with it with that. In addition, if you've been by the house on Middlebury, the front yard as the house is, it looks like it's a 1.5 story house. There's a large roof across the main body of the front, but no windows on the front. And so the second floor does face backwards mostly. The applicants did want to add some windows to the front of the house for aesthetic and other reasons, but that would have required additional floor area. So they didn't make that request because they've done everything they can to keep these variations to a bare minimum. One of the other quirks of the house that they're seeking to solve is the second floor is not contiguous. So if you're looking at the house, the wing to the right, so the southern wing, has a room above the family room, but that's not connected to the rest of the house. And they're seeking with these plans to address that. In addition, just because of the way the house was built, and it was built in a different era, the architect and the staff actually had some trouble kind of going through and doing the actual calculation, because some of the floor area that goes into the calculation is unusable space. And we'll talk about the floor area variation last, but there are a number of different spaces that are not usable, and the applicants are seeking to sort of reallocate, if you will, a portion, but not all of that unusable space. One of the goals of the plan is to eliminate the flat roofs and the slightly pitched roof on the north and south end of the main body, because there are issues with ice damming and leakage and whatnot. And as I said, one of the primary goals is to connect the second floor to make it contiguous. So with that sort of brief introduction, I'd like to go through each of the 4 variations briefly. We did give a write-up on each of them separately because there are different issues with each of them. The first one I'd like to take on is the side yard setback. And as we all know, it's very small. It's 0.35 feet. And a few points about that. First off, the variation would not move the house any closer to the adjoining home. It would just extend an existing condition to the north and to the south. There is a small cantilever over that part of the house on the second floor, which again will relate to some unusable space, because the area under the cantilever, even though it's outside the house, is considered living space. But that condition they want is they expand the roof, the main roof line, both north and south. They would extend this condition as well. We could imagine a scenario where you might be able to build in a different way, but you're going to have some unusual angles and situations that again could create some construction problems and the potential for some water penetrations and whatnot. So they'd like to take the existing condition and continue it. The other thing that I would note on this condition is it is less than a foot, and the lot, I believe, is 60 feet wide. So in a typical 50-foot wide lot, the side yard would only be, the required side yard would only be 5 feet as opposed to 6 feet. So if this house were of a typical width, as most of the houses are in the neighborhood, no variation would be required. And the final point I would make on this is the neighbor who would be most affected, the neighbor immediately east, is in support of the application. Does anyone have any questions about this, or would you like me to go through all 4 and then questions? However you'd like to proceed, Chairman.
Any questions for Mr. Murdoch at this point, or should he proceed with all the other items?
Proceed, I think.
Thank you. So the second variation request is a front yard setback variation of 3.03 feet. And again, this gets into some of the quirkiness of the house. It is the front yard of the house because it's the narrower of the 2 widths, even though the house does face the other street. Functionally, it's the side yard. But when this house was built, it was really built with a 1-car or a 1.5-car garage. One of the 2 spaces is substantially less than 18 feet deep because one of the 2 chimneys is sited in the garage space. And so I know that when we lived in the house, we were never able to use that second garage space. So the applicants are seeking to make this a conforming garage space by extending the length to the minimum 18 feet. And that requires the garage effectively to be pushed out into what is defined as the front yard by 3.03 feet. I would make a couple of notes about this as well, because the house is built right up to that setback. Any extension of the garage to make a conforming parking spot would require this variation. I would also note that the garage, if the variation is granted, would be 402 square feet, which is still substantially below what the village has defined as a standard garage based on the garage bonus of 440 square feet. So the applicant didn't come in and say, we'd like to have a standard size 440 foot garage, which would have required this extension to go further into the front yard, but instead took the minimum amount to allow for an 18 foot garage space for the western of the two spaces, which currently is not a legal garage space. Any questions for me? Yes.
Hi, Mike. I've got a question. So you're saying it would be 18 feet clear from the chimney to the new wall?
With the 3.03 extension, it would allow it to be the 18 feet. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. So right now it's only 15. So.
Correct. But right now it's just 15. And I mean, I had a Nissan Leaf and I couldn't get that in there.
Yeah.
It's very tight. Yep.
Okay.
The third variation request is for a front yard impervious surface variation. And this one is a little bit more challenging for us in the sense that, you know, I certainly want to make the point that everything was done to minimize the front yard setback variation. And I believe everything has been done to minimize the floor area variation. With this one, and Lisa, if you'd be good enough to pull up the photo of the house from Kenilworth so we can talk about this a little bit. While Lisa's doing that, I'll just note that because this was never considered a parking space, the driveway was never designed to allow for a car to get in and out of this space. Lisa, actually, if we could, that's okay. But do you have the photo that we sent coming from Kenilworth? This does show the angle of the driveway so that you can't back directly out from this space because it wasn't a parking space. But I was hoping to illustrate it a little bit more with the photo taken from Kenilworth.
I'm sorry, I think this is the only photo I got of the exterior.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
So the variation on that side, Mike, is to widen the driveway to accommodate getting into the second space.
It's to widen the driveway to get into the second space. And while we have this up, let me point out a couple of things. You may notice that the pavement actually goes all the way to the eastern edge of the property. And the reason for that is because the driveway does narrow as it goes down to the street, and there is a bit of a grade change from Kenilworth up to the property up in. But you know, if there were no other constraints, I believe it would be possible to have a driveway that really comes straight in the center of the two spaces and then sort of flares out a little bit at the very end. But there's a parkway tree that the owners don't want to impact, not just the trunk, but also the root system and the crown of that tree. So as a result, if you take a look at, and I think it was in the packet where the garage is proposed to be, I mean, the driveway is proposed to be superimposed over the existing, they basically take the driveway straight back to the south until you get about the setback, and then cut in to the east further, so that they don't impact the tree in any way. So on this variation request, it's designed to make the second garage space functional in a way that was never intended because it was never a garage space. There may be ways for us to shave a little bit here and there, but we drew it. We had the architect draw it so that two cars could comfortably, the car in the western space could comfortably get into the garage without having to move or relocate the car in the eastern space. So the result of that is a request for the 261.1 square feet of impervious surface in that side yard, which is considered the front yard, the way this house in this lot is designed.
Is Mr. Murdoch, what we're looking at now, is that the configuration of the driveway?
This is the current configuration.
No, this is actually the proposed. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for and I have this on my phone. I apologize. So I was having trouble seeing. I apologize.
There should be another one that is the existing though. I'm not sure if it's the page prior. Oh.
And Matt, thank you for that. I appreciate your help.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the final variation request is for 414.96 square foot of total floor area. And we recognize that this is a significant request. This is larger than a 20 by 20 room. But I wanted to take you through some of those quirks of the house that I discussed before, and explain how the way this house was built long before the current zoning codes. It includes a tremendous amount of space, substantially more than the 414 square feet of completely unusable space. By our calculation, it's actually over 537 square feet of space. And it really relates to three specific areas of the house. The first is, if you take a look at this this diagram, you'll see that at the eastern end of the house, the top of the diagram there is a small 1.9 foot cantilever, which is an existing condition that the owners are asking to extend to the north and the south. That's the reason for the 0.35 side yard setback variation. And so the area under all of this condition on the first floor, even though it's outside the house, is included in the floor area calculations. And so that cantilever, the existing cantilever is over 75 feet, and the addition is another 58. So that's 134.13 feet of outdoor space that's included in the living space calculation for this house. The second area, and Lisa, if you wouldn't mind going to the attic photo, and then we'll come back to this photo. The second area is the attic space, and we're all aware that many houses, including this one, have some attic space over 6'9" that's deemed included in the floor area calculations. And it is true that it does add somewhat to the bulk of the house, but in many cases, families are able to utilize that space. Certainly, when I build a house, we try to maximize the area under 6'9" that doesn't count in the calculation with the small amount in the middle. But in those cases, we always contemplate a way that we can effectively get up to the attic, either for living space or for storage. And Lisa, if you have that photo of the attic, I wanted to show everyone that there is a Bessler stair up to that attic space, and then it's an unfinished space with insulation, and it's really not even, there's no way to use it even for storage, and certainly not for living space. So while it's not uncommon for houses to have some of this, and it does impact the bulk to some degree, this attic space, with the existing attic of about 115.17 square feet, and then if we extend the main roof line both to the north and the south, there's some additional attic that would be the total attic space, which is not usable living space, is 210.65 square feet.
I have a quick question, Mike.
Sure.
Is that the amount that's 6'9" or taller?
That's the amount that's over 6'9". That's correct. So it's a small strip running along the highest part of the attic, both in the existing, and then that condition would be extended both to the north and to the south.
Mike, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
If you look at 1.8 and 1.13 for a second, which is in the elevation, the west elevation proposed. 1.8 shows the proposed second floor plan. And to the right, there is an office on the second floor, which I assume is all usable or counts as area. If you then turn to the existing elevation which has also an office or something like that and has a window.
Yes.
If you look at 1.13, at that elevation, keeping in mind that there's an office back there, and there's no, is that it? 1.13. Now, somewhere in there is an office, and I can't imagine how you can fit an office up there.
So
in that triangle.
This is the reverse elevation from what you're comparing, Reinhard. This is the.
I don't think so.
The east elevation.
No, this is the west elevation.
This is the west. So this is the front of the house.
This is the front of the house. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a fair question then.
So there is a small, as I had explained in my introductory remarks, there is a small office on that second floor of the south wing of the house, and it is a very small space. That's correct, and it is not connected to the rest of the second floor space. So one of the goals of this plan is to connect that portion of the house with the rest of the second floor. Right now, that space can only be accessed from a spiral staircase from the family room below. So as you see this diagram,
I can understand that, and I can see that on 1.8. If you go back to the floor plan,
okay,
it seems that you have access from that corridor to that space. It just seems. And it shows that there's maybe a window or some opening to the west. I just don't know how that can fit into that space that's shown on the elevation, but
right. Currently, there is a window there, and to your point, and I apologize, the architect isn't available. He may be contemplating a slightly larger opening than is shown right now, but the intent is that that space would become accessible from the second floor, the rest of the second floor, where it's not accessible now.
How big is that space?
That room, that office room, Matt, do you have the exact dimensions by any chance?
I don't have the exact dimensions. If I had to take a guess, though, I'd say it's probably 10 feet by 8 feet, maybe. And again, not all of that has, 6'9", because it's a triangle. So it is a very skinny strip of space. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I was just that's an additional 80 or whatever square feet. And again, I don't know how much of that 8 by 10 that you talk about is really 6'9", because if you look at the elevation, the dimension from the top of the window is, I can't make that, what is that, 8 feet to the top, almost to the top of the roof. So anyway, it's
an existing space, and it is a tight space, but it does exist now. And the homeowners would like to be able to make that accessible to the rest of the second floor.
Okay.
Part of the challenge with making that connection is the fact, and you can see on this diagram in front of us, there are 2 chimneys, and the chimney on the right that's adjacent to this space does come down into the garage. That was the reason for the front yard setback variance we requested. And then they need some additional space to get around that chimney to get into that space. I'd like to talk about the last space that is not usable. And Lisa, if you could go back to the floor plan that we were looking at just a minute ago. There we go. So when you take a look at this, you will see that in the left side of the diagram, there is a large rectangle that references tray ceiling below, and you'll see an area blocked out in granite, and that's really where the chimney travels. And the chimney is centered in the living room down below, and then it comes at an angle up to the edge of the existing main roof line. You can see the other chimney on the other side of the house is a much smaller gray area. But this large rectangular area here, where it references tray ceiling below, that area has never been accessible in any way to the house. That's actually why the tray ceiling was created, to try to give that room a little bit more volume because of the dead space up above. And it will continue to be inaccessible space. And it's a very large area of the house that actually is included in the FAR calculations. It's 192.23 square feet. So this very large area is not usable space. It's never been usable space, and it won't be usable space after the addition, but it's counted in the FAR, the floor area calculation, because it's greater than 17 feet 9 inches from the first floor. And you know, that provision in the code is obviously designed to reduce and manage the bulk of a house. And again, as a builder, I can say that often builders do like to create more volume, makes the house feel bigger and more spacious, but in doing so, it can add to the bulk. And so it's important to have a provision like this in the code, so that if a volume is created, that it doesn't make the house too big and bulky for the neighborhood. In this case, this exists, and it always has existed with the house. We're not adding any bulk with this area, but it counts in terms of the bulk of the house. And again, when this house was built, there was no such provision in the code. So while aesthetically, I think these two wings of the house, as you look at the front yard as the house appears on Middlebury, these two wings coming out make it a very gracious house. But the net effect is you have a lot of space that's just simply not usable space. So when you take a look at these three areas of space that aren't usable for the applicant, the 210.65 feet of attic space, the 134.13 feet of cantilevered space, first floor space below a cantilever that's actually outside of the house, and then this area on the northern wing, which is space above the first floor. And I think, Chairman Reinhardt, going back to your comment, that room on the south wing, it's a very small room. The applicants probably never would have built it if it didn't already exist. And I think that if we were to ask them sort of a theoretical question, is there a way that they could do something to make that space, both in the attic of the north wing and the attic of the south wing, kind of go away and not count, so that they could sort of square off the main part of the house? They would certainly like to do that. But this house was built long before the current codes, and the architect didn't make these kinds of calculations and these kinds of trade-offs. So when you total up these three spaces, it's 537.01 square feet of space. And the applicants didn't come in here tonight and say, well, we'd like you to give us back that space. They really just took a look at what could we do to extend the main roof line north and to the south to eliminate some maintenance and construction issues, and to sort of square off the house and make the existing living space in that south attic, if you will, connected to the rest of the house. And so that's how they arrived at the 414.96. They've done everything they can, to keep this floor area request to a minimum.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch. Are there any? Sorry.
I guess I still don't understand. I understand all the calculations, but you mentioned you're not adding to the bulk, but you are adding to the bulk.
If you heard me say that, I apologize. That wasn't my intent. I was referring specifically to the space above the two wings, where there is area that counts in terms of bulk and in terms of floor area, because the house was built a long time ago when that wasn't part of the calculation, if you will. So yes, the extension of the main roof line to the north and to the south absolutely does add to the bulk. So if you heard me say that, I apologize. That wasn't my intent.
I may have interpreted it wrong as well.
Any questions for Mr. Murdoch or the applicants, please? Well, Mr. Murdoch, you must have been very clear and explicit and no questions. So shall I close testimony? Would the owners have any comments?
I mean, my only comment is, you know, I appreciate everybody's, you know, taking a look at this and taking a decision. The only thing I'd say is we moved recently from Seattle to Illinois and into this house, and so all I can say is that, you know, the goal here is certainly to try to make this house our forever home. We do have a small daughter, and we look to grow our family as we go forward. So, you know, that's our sole intent, was to really make this house, you know, certainly our home. And I think the only other thing I'll call out is, you know, we did make every intent to stay within the existing footprint of the house, and was very modest in, I think, what we're trying to do at the end of the day, to be respectful of all of the different variations that we are asking for and the codes that do exist. So again, I appreciate all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Ms. Roberts, have we heard anything from anyone out there in this case?
There's no one, no comments in the YouTube chat, and I don't believe there's anybody else in the meeting on this matter. Also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add, I did not include it in the report, but in this zoning district, there is no bonus for the attic area. That's kind of unusual, but that's Kenilworth Gardens, so just for what that's worth.
Thank you. So we can close the testimony on this and ask for a motion.
Okay, I'll move to recommend granting a request for a 414.96 square foot or 3.8% total floor area variation, a 3.03 front yard setback variation, and a 0.35 side yard variation, and a 2.16.1 square foot or 13.93 front yard impervious surface variation to permit the construction of a 1-story and 2 second-story additions at 1300 Middlebury Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Who is Brad? Did you make the second?
Didier.
It was Didier.
Oh, Didier. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Okay. I guess you know, the 3 first variances we talked about, I don't have a problem with, for the driveway, the extension of the garage. My concern, and I'm on the fence, I want to hear from other board members, is just adding more space or volume to the house and going over. It is a modest request. I think since the roofs are pitched, that doesn't add as much mass. So that's the only one. And I understand the need to connect the spaces, and I do understand areas that are counted that have impacted the floor area ratio. So, like I said, I'm kind of on the fence. I'd like to hear from the other board members.
Any comments? Okay, go ahead.
Bob, I wanted to get Bob, you're saying that the only question you had was the 414.96 square foot total floor area variation?
Yeah, I don't have a
Yes.
problem with the driveway or the extension of the garage makes sense. And the impervious as a result of the garage. It's really the added square footage of the house.
So,
We're going from a 4-bedroom house to a 5-bedroom house.
Right.
and so Bob, so that I better understand, because I looked at this and I didn't see a whole, I mean, if you took a snapshot of the outside of the house before and after, I didn't get a sense that you would see a dramatically different house.
Well, you would just see there's a ridge line on the second floor that basically runs between the two chimneys. And if you go to the image on 1.13, Brad, if you look at that, you can see.
Yeah, if you compare that with 1.11 or 1.10, there is a tremendous difference. I actually think it makes the house look better. You know.
To have it continuous, sure.
Yeah.
It's also the side you actually never see because it's facing to the east, right? So if you approach the house from the south or the west or the north, nothing much has changed. The only person who really sees this is the neighbor to the east. Am I correct?
No.
Neighbor to the
I
west.
would see from the west as well.
Oh, to the west. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So you do see it from the street, from the west. Okay.
It about doubles the ridge line of the house.
Any other comments? Didier, did you have a comment?
You're
We
on
can't
mute.
hear you.
My comment would be that, I, again, don't have a problem with any of the variance requests except for the FAR. I'm in question on that, not necessarily convinced I'm against it. I do feel that looking at the elevations of the building, that the changes do make the building look better, even from the street, which they front Kenilworth. I think the street that they really front, since it really doesn't go any further to the north, the bulk that they're adding isn't going to be all that visible to many people. And I do feel that it does improve bring the property up to more current standards, and will add to the value of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
This is Chris. Yeah, I too agree that that aesthetically, I think it's a nice change. And yeah, I mean, I was persuaded by sort of the quirkiness of the house and quite a bit of space, unusable space, or space that adds to their numbers, to their floor area ratio that they don't really get to utilize. So I don't have a problem with the request, and I can support it.
Thank you.
I will also be supporting this request. I think Mike did a great job itemizing all of the unusable space that will be counting against their FAR. And I agree with what was said earlier. I think Ryrie said it, that the changes to the elevation really make the house more appealing, more attractive, and certainly far more usable. So I'll be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree with most of what has been said, that the FAR was really explained. The incremental or the excess FAR is really not usable. I think the other variations are really they're not as a result of what the applicants are doing to the buildings. They are kind of inherited with the existing structure, and so I can support this request as well. And if no other comments, can we go to a vote? Ms. Roberts?
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Mr. Falkoff,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So this will go with a positive recommendation to the village board, which will meet on June 22nd. You might want to be there. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you
great-
so much. Really appreciate your consideration.
Nice
Yeah.
evening.
Nice presentation, Mike.
Yeah.
Very nice presentation, very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we need to take another
I-
vote here.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for case number 2021-C-14.
Second.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Falkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Can we go to the next case, please?
Our next case is 2021 Z11, 1131 Greenleaf Avenue. This is a request for a special use for an art studio, YMA Taekwondo and Krav Maga LLC, and I believe our applicants are here.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for being so patient with us. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Hello, my name is Eniko Sabo, and I'm the owner of YMA Taekwondo.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Yeah. My name is Eniko Sabo, and I'm the owner of YMA Taekwondo and Krav Maga. We are currently located in Arlington Heights, and we've been there for the past 18 years. We're planning to expand to Wilmette to 1131 Greenleaf Avenue. And we are here to seek approval in opening the business. We are planning to add the same programs that we offer in Arlington Heights, Taekwondo, Krav Maga, and a bag workout. Taekwondo is a Korean martial arts and is very popular with children, but we will be offering these classes for all ages. We're gonna have also Krav Maga, which is the Israeli self-defense system, and it's extremely popular with men in the 30s, 40s, and 50s because of the really great workouts, a fun workout, in the same time, the benefits of the self-defense. The other programs we're gonna have is the bag workout, which is very popular with women because it's a high intensity training. It's a great way to get in shape, lose weight, and you know, it's a great workout. It's also popular with the men as well. We're planning to have classes Monday through Friday. From 4 p.m. till 8 p.m. And maximum classes will be we probably gonna have 4 classes per day. We're gonna have 2 Taekwondo, 1 Krav Maga, and 1 back fitness. We're planning to open 3 times a week at the beginning. And once the classes are filling up, we're planning to extend to 5 days a week. We're not planning to offer any classes on Saturday and Sunday except Monday through Friday. The maximum amount of people we plan to have is like 10 to 15 people per class. It all depends, actually, the size of the people. That's all. I don't know if you have any questions.
What is the current space used for? Do you know?
The Greenleaf space?
Yes.
It's 1,100 square feet.
And what was its use before you leased it?
It was a bit space, and it looks like was a children activity place.
Yeah, BitSpace was a sort of a maker camp kind of thing, where using a variety of tools and equipment, children could create things.
Yes, it's some kind of activity, children activity.
Thank you.
I have a question for Lisa. The parking requirements there isn't a parking requirement. Is that correct, Lisa? Because it's in the downtown area?
That is correct.
I believe that's correct, Bob, yeah.
Okay.
Occupying an existing space.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
About the hours of the store. You say it'll be open from 4 to 7:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. If business gets strong enough, do you see those hours expanding? And what are the hours at your Arlington Heights store?
So we do have the same hours from 4 to 8 p.m. in Arlington Heights. Usually, we also, when I signed the lease over here with the landlord, I told him that since it's a brand new business for the area, I'm not willing to take a big space. I'm taking the 1,100 square feet, but we did agree that at a 2-year point, if I think that the space is not good enough for me, he allows me to move out from there to expand, either within his buildings or I can just find another place around Wilmette. So we do have that agreement with the landlord that if I think the space is not good enough for me, then I can leave. Of course, I have to pay the penalty, but he will allow me to leave.
Thank you for that.
And are you familiar with other martial arts businesses in Wilmette?
No, I'm not familiar with any of them.
Because there are 3 of them within about a quarter mile of your proposed location.
Mm-hmm.
There's one at Lake and Green Bay. There's another one on Central, about 2 blocks from you. And then there's Staley Martial Arts on Green Bay, which is further south, closer to Evanston.
So the one I do know about, the karate place, which is on, I don't know, that street 2 blocks
Central.
from here. Yes, on that street, but that's karate, which is completely different than Taekwondo. Karate is allowed punches and forms, while Taekwondo is all kicking. It's a completely different martial art. So we cannot compare Taekwondo and karate. It's the same thing like I eat taco or I eat mashed potato. So it's a completely different martial art. So, and then Krav Maga, no one is offering Krav Maga in the whole area over there. The next Krav Maga place will be Highland Park up there, but no Krav Maga around this area. And that's the reason we're moving. I'm trying to expand to Wilmette because we do have a lot of requests. People from Winnetka, from Lake Forest, from Evanston, they want to learn Krav Maga. And Arlington Heights is extremely far for them to come.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, can we close? Is there anybody else, Ms. Roberts, that wants to talk on this?
There are no comments in the YouTube chat and nobody else in the meeting for this matter.
Okay, thank you. So I can close the testimony and ask for a motion.
I move to recommend granting a request for a special use for an art studio, YMA Taekwondo and Krav Maga LLC at 1131 Greenleaf Avenue in accordance with the plans submitted. The zoning board determines that the use should run with the use.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
I think this sounds like a great use for the space. They clearly have been running a successful operation in Arlington Heights and perceive a demand for their services in Wilmette. And it'll be a way to activate space that is currently unused. So I'll be supporting this.
And I would say the reason that I asked about whether or not the applicant was familiar with the other martial arts studios is because while there is no Taekwondo studio currently, there was one previously. Staley is jiu-jitsu, and as she pointed out, Fonseca is karate. I'm not sure what martial arts Agbon martial arts teaches, and it's impossible even to figure it out from their website because I did check that. And yes, I'm familiar with Krav Maga up on Skokie Boulevard or Skokie Highway in Highland Park. So I believe that this will be a benefit to the neighborhood, and I can support it.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, can we go to a vote? Ms. Roberts? By the way, before, I think I asked already, we haven't, go ahead. I think we can go to a vote, Ms. Roberts.
Ms. Urban?
Yes.
Mr. Pelleton?
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes, thank you. And this will go with a positive recommendation to the village board that will meet on June 22nd, and you may want to be there. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for case number 2021 Z13.
Seconded.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. Ms. Roberts, are there any other, any general comments out there for us to entertain?
There is no one else in the meeting for anything other than what's been on the agenda.
Thank you.
So I'll make, should
Go
I make
ahead.
a motion? Okay, I
Please.
make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Ms. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Felkoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gletard,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
Yes.
Mr. Pelletin,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes.
Before we all go, Lisa, do you want to just, you said the next meeting is remote, but then July 7th is confirmed?
Yes.
It's in person?
In person, yep.
Okay.
Okay. I think